What I want to talk about today is the mood of verbs. Now, verbs are an interesting part of speech because they're the only part of speech that has different moods. Now, you might wonder, what does mood of a verb mean anyway? So let's talk more about that. The mood of a verb conveys the status of the action or the condition it describes. Well, that'll make more sense when you start to see the examples. There's three moods of verbs: indicative, imperative, and subjunctive. So let's find out what those mean. The indicative mood of a verb is what you use to make statements and ask questions. And because statements and questions are common, the indicative is the most commonly used verb mood. So let's look at some examples. My friend Lisa likes to copy the hairstyles of movie stars. Very straightforward. It's a statement. This is the indicative mood of the verb like. Why is it that so many people are not happy with who they are? This is a question. Again, you use the indicative mood when you're making a statement or asking questions. Now let's talk about the imperative mood. The imperative mood you use to make a request or give a command. And when you use the imperative mood, the understood subject is you, even though the subject, you, is omitted from the sentence. Let's look at the example. Be independent. Stop worrying about what others think. This is the imperative mood of a verb because it's making a request or giving a command, and the subject, you, is omitted. Now we know be independent means you be independent. Stop worrying about what others think means you stop worrying about what others think. That omitted subject and the fact that we're looking at a request or a command tells us that these verbs are in the imperative mood. Now let's talk about the subjunctive mood. You use the subjunctive mood to express a wish or state a condition that is contrary to fact. That means something that isn't, but you wish it was. In this type of subjunctive expression, use the word were instead of was. For example, the sentence, I wish I were older and Grandpa wishes he were younger. We're stating a condition or a wish that's not what reality is. The reality is the speaker of this sentence is young and Grandpa is old. Each one of them wishes that the condition was different. That's an example of subjunctive mood. Let's talk a little bit more about subjunctive mood. You also used it in sentences that give a command or make a request. When you use it this way, you use the base form of the verb. Let's look at the example. The school requires that students be in homeroom by 8 a.m. Now, this is the base form of the verb be. When you see the base form in a sentence like this, you know that it's the subjunctive mood. Let's talk about subjunctive a little bit more. Writers use the subjunctive mood to help them express things that are different than they seem to be. We're going to look at a passage in just a minute that expresses the feelings of a boy who happens to bump into a girl from school while he's on his paper route. So let's take a look at that now. Because we stopped, we were friends. I didn't know how I could stop, but I didn't hurry on. I stood. There was nothing to do but to act as if I were walking on out too. I had 3 papers left in the bag, and I frantically began to fold them, box them as we called it, for throwing. We had begun to walk and talk. Now, this is expressing something that is contrary to fact. These two people aren't really friends, but because they were put in a situation together, they acted as though they were friends. So when you have that something that's not exactly the way it seems to be, you use the subjunctive mood. Let's look at some more examples. Now what I've done in this example is I've used S for subjunctive, IN for indicative, and IM for imperative. I've also made each one of those verb examples a different color. So here, let's look at this letter. Dear wishful thinker, in your letter I wrote, I wish I were older. Were is a subjunctive form of the verb. Why are, that's indicative, you in a hurry. If your wish were, that's subjunctive again, granted, you would soon want to be younger. What a waste of time. Each person is born in a certain space and time. Nothing he or she does will ever change, that's indicative, it's making a statement, that. Don't waste, that's imperative, energy wishing for the impossible. Spend, that's also imperative, the time you do have on learning, growing, and enjoying what life has to offer. John Adams once said, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be, that's subjunctive, our wishes, they cannot alter the state of facts. The fact is," that's indicative again, "that you are the age you are. Take," that's imperative, "full advantage of that fact, and use," another imperative, "your precious time more wisely." Now let's look at all of the ones that are in yellow, subjunctive. In the first two, it's indicating a wish that's different than reality. I wish I were older. If your wish were granted, that's why we're using subjunctive. Now in the third example of subjunctive, whatever may be our wishes, they cannot alter the state of facts. This isn't saying something that's contrary to reality, but it's using the base form of the verb. So that's why we're using that as a subjunctive. Now let's look at the red ones. Those are indicative. Indicative verb moods make statements or ask questions. And if you look at the examples, that's exactly what they do. Why are you in a hurry? That's a question. Nothing he or she does will ever change that. That's a statement. The fact is that you are the age you are. That's another statement. All of those are indicative mood. Then we have our light bluish purple ones. Those are imperative. I want you to notice every single one of those sentences is lacking the subject you. It's understood. Don't waste energy. That means you don't waste energy. Spend the time. You spend the time. And then we have two more in the last sentence. Take full advantage of that fact and use your precious time wisely. Each one of those has the understood subject of you. That's why it's imperative mood. So understanding the moods of verbs is another way to make your writing stronger and more meaningful.